Okay, we're holding on page Vav in the Mimer. I'm sorry, not page Ches in the Mimer. Sorry, page Gimel, and we were speaking about the two levels of the weekday versus Shabbos, the two levels of Mishkan and Mishkan Ha'edus, Mishkan Pekudei and Mishkan Zichud Tata. Mishkan Ha'edus is Zichud Ilah, and uh, and this is also the difference between the weekday and Shabbos. So we brought the Mimer as well from the Torah that speaks about this idea of concerning Shabbos. And in connection with that, we're going to speak further in the different levels of Shabbos and how that is impacted by the week and what Shabbos affects within itself, the different levels of Shabbos. So we're holding line 3, page Ches Ois Gim. In a Yishem Shnes Bar B'Lukut Torah. Just like was explained in Lukut Torah, so parts Pekudei, the end of parts Pekudei. And again, La'avarab, concerning the great love. So we added, if you remember, we said one point about this great love, the difference between Avas Oilam, we said the love that is of the world, meaning it comes from thinking into the world, and therefore it's a limited love because it's coming from understanding the limited aspect of Hashem that animates and gives life and gives vitality to the world. In the same way, we have the level of, or contrasting that, there's the level of Ava Rabba, the great love, meaning that has no limitations. It's not coming from the world, it's coming from the innate connection of the Yid with Hashem. And that's why Shabbos, which is coming from above, symbolizes this level of Hashpah Milmaila, the level of Avarabba, whereas the work that one engages in the world, that is similar to the idea of the Ava Magbelis, the limited love of Avas Oilam. And we said also, we mentioned on the top of page Vav, towards the end of Aleph, that through Aaron, which represents the level of Avarabba, Aaron is the level of Isha Chesed, is the great love, the infinite love of Atzilus. So that empowers us for us to be able to do the Sarusa Dolasata, the inspiration down here below, what we are doing with our avodah, the level of Yichud Tata, the level of engaging with the world, and so on. So this is found also at the end of that Mimer of there, Torah and Parts Pekudei. That's where the Rebbe is taking that from earlier. Cain, Gambin in a Shabbos. So the Rebbe compares it that this is also the idea of Shabbos. Though Shabbos' level is very high, we can now, like we said earlier, the Shabbos, that the level of love of Shabbos is the great love, but it's not about remaining in that level of greatness. Just remaining in that level of wow, amazing love, above and beyond, and so on. The main thing is, and the goal is the empowerment for the inspiration down here below in the avoidum of the weekdays that follow Shabbos. This is similar to what in last week's parsha of Vayakel, there's a sichel. The sichel is the last liquid that Rebbe gave out before encouraging, among other things, to learn yesterday from Zayin Oder, to learn this liquid. The Rebbe speaks about that the Rambam mentions the idea that one of the ways how one uses or one is liable for lighting a fire on Shabbos, it needs to be a productive, not destructive, constructive purpose for lighting the fire. So the first thing that Rambam enumerates over there is that he's tzarich la'efer, that he's kindling the fire because he needs the ashes. Just to give an example, like we need to have ashes to dip the egg in on Erev Tisha B'Av, so he's burning the fire So you should be able to have those ashes to be able to dip in. The point is that it has to be a constructive type of labor. And the Rebbe in the Sikha speaks at length over there about why he gives over there different examples of where a person would be liable for kindling a fire on Shabbos. Why is this the first of the examples? And the Rebbe explains essentially as follows in the spiritual aspect of it. Fire is the idea of the fiery love of the neshama for Hashem, that it's so powerful that it wants to leave the body, like the Alter Rebbe speaks about the Perikut Ches and Tanya, like the nature of fire is to want to leave the wick, so to the Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, the soul of man is like candle, that it wants to leave with its fiery love for Hashem and wants to depart the body. But that is not the purpose of it. The purpose of that fiery love, and that fiery love is only fulfilled when it's tzarich la'efer, when you need to have the ashes. What's the idea of ashes? The Alter Rebbe, towards the end of Tanya, in the Geras HaKodesh, it explains that when fire consumes something, the lowest thing that's left over is the ashes. That comes from the element of earth that was in the item that was burnt up. The water element, the ruach element, the wind element, all that went up with smoke, with the fire, and so on. The water, the wind, and the fire element went up in the smoke and in the fire, etc. But the dust, the ashes that remain, that's the lowest aspect. So the purpose of our kindling our soul, with the fiery love of Hashem, is to have the ashes, to have the ashes to deal with this world, to engage with the world. And if one doesn't engage with the world, then the whole purpose of the fire and the whole idea of the fire is not considered a malach and shlema. It's not considered a complete work. It's not the real idea of making a dirlois baruch tachtonim, which the work in the Mishkan is all about, and so on. So in a similar vein, he says over here, this great love that Shabbos is about is for the sake of what's going to take place during the weekday. So the Rebbe is going to elaborate on this with a question. Line 10. The idea behind this is, seemingly in the this makes sense during the weekdays. Someone during the week needs to think about and needs to prepare for the day of Shabbos. The teaching of our Chazal, Misha Tarach Be'erev Shabbos, Yechab Shabbos. One who put in effort before Shabbos will eat on Shabbos. But if a person did not prepare before Shabbos, is going to come to Shabbos, he can't cook, he can't buy any food, he can't do anything. He's stuck without food. The same thing, the idea of thinking about it as well, is similar to what it says concerning Beis Shammai or Shammai Azokin, that every single time he went to the marketplace and he saw something good, he said, we'll use this for Shabbos. Then when he saw something better, he said, okay, we'll put this away, use it during the week, then we'll use this new thing for Shabbos, and so on. So the whole week, he was thinking about Shabbos. This is also expressed in the fact that we say, Hayoim Yom Rishon B'Shabbos, Hayoim Yom Sheni B'Shabbos, Hayoim Yom Shlish B'Shabbos, that really the week is about preparation for Shabbos. So, if so Shabbos is the pinnacle. Shabbos is the top of what we're reaching for and what we're striving for. So how do you now turn it around? When one already attains and reaches the quality and the height of the day of Shabbos, so one has reached such a pinnacle, he's reached the apex of the high state that's totally beyond any connection to the weekday. Especially according to what's written, that Havaya gave you the Shabbos. So earlier in the Maimer, we emphasized the giving component, that this is something that comes from above, it's just a La'ela, it's given to us, etc. It's a matana, and a matana is independent of the state of the receiver and so on. But here the emphasis is going to be on the name that says about it. Ki Havaya Nosel Shabbos. Havaya Daika specifically Havaya Shulamayla Mishem Elakim is beyond the name Elakim Shashayach Lebrias Olam. The name Elakim is associated in connection and connected with the creation of the world. Like we find Shashloish Mishtayim Pamim Nemar Elakim B'Mais Bereshis. It says 32 times in the creation. It says the name Elohim 32 times. No name of Havaya. Havaya only comes after 32 times saying, Vayomer Elohim Yihor Bereshis Bara Elohim, Vayomer Elohim Yihor. After saying 32 times only and solely the name Elohim, the first time Shem Havaya is mentioned is only after that. And even then, Vafilu B'Gemar Ma'aser Bereshis, even at the end of Ma'aser Bereshis, Nemar B'Yom HaSois Havaya Elohim Eretz V'Shamayim. Doesn't say Havaya alone. It says Havaya in conjunction with Shem Elohim. So it's not the ultimate idea, meaning that when we're talking about the creation, we're talking about the world, we're talking about the weekday and mundane matters, that's not Havaya. At the most, it's Havaya the way it's enclosed in Shem Elohim. But it's primarily about Shem Elohim, the midah of tzimtzum, constriction, limitation, the chayis that comes into the world, like we spoke about before, that the person meditates on to be able to reach the level of Avas Olam, the Ava from the world. But over here it says that Havaya gave you the Shabbos. It doesn't say Elikim Nasl Chamas Shabbos. It doesn't even say Havaya and Elikim Nasl Chamas Shabbos. Havaya Bilvad, only Havaya. Then the Rebbe goes back to not goes back, but he goes further in the pasuk that says Nasa. But what I'm saying goes back is he's adding to what we spoke about the Nasan in the previous ice, and he gives a deeper insight into the concept of Nasan, giving. Hashem gave you the Shabbos. That is something that shows on a very high level. Could have said Hashem commanded you to keep the Shabbos. Nasan, he gave you. Again, also like before we spoke about it, but we'll emphasize this some more about how Shabbos is so totally above and beyond the world. Let's see it inside. Line 23. We could add in the exact language of the pasuk that Hashem gave you the Shabbos, Nasan Daike specifically gave Losh Matana, an expression of gift. Like it says, that Hashem said, "Matana Toiva Yeshli B'Tachinazai." I have a beautiful gift, a good gift that in my storage house, and its name is Shabbos. So it's a level of a gift. What does this idea of a gift indicate? According to what's explained in a different maimer, the Yesh Sholish Madregas B'Inyan Shabbos. There are three levels in the concept of Shabbos. Madrega Rishona, the first level, the initial level, to buy the Avodah V'Yigiyah. There's the way Shabbos comes through effort, comes through toil. Like we said before, the one who makes effort, puts an effort on the eve of Shabbos, before Shabbos, he will eat on Shabbos. And Chassidus explains, and it's also in the Hayom Yom, that to be able to experience Shabbos, to be able to really have the Shabbos the way it's supposed to be, one needs to go into Shabbos in an appropriate preparation. There's a letter of the Frierdiker Rebbe where he tells, it seems to be written already in America, someone that's like, really fayokt, and the American style that was very difficult then, with Parnasa and keeping Shabbos, but the Frierdiker Rebbe was telling him that he was encouraging him further. It's not just enough to keep Shabbos, but he was telling him, don't come into Shabbos like you're just coming from work and you're coming right into Shabbos. Rather, finish work in the middle of the day, give yourself time to catch your breath, rest up a little bit, so that when you come into Shabbos, you're more in a Shabbos state of mind. You're not busy catching your breath. You're not, in Yiddish say, farsapit, you're not out of breath. But also spiritually, the Frierdiker Rebbe explains over there in that Hayom Yom, that to be able to reach the spiritual idea of Shabbos, one needs to prepare spiritually for that during the middle of the week. And that's what he says over there in the Hayom Yom, that the reason why on Yom Revi, in the Shir Shal Yom Revi, we finish off with L'chun Ranana, and we're ready. The first three psukim of L'chun Rana is at the end of the Shir Shal Yom, to go into the mood of Shabbos to start our preparations for Shabbos. So one needs that is one level of Shabbos, the effort and the labor, physically, spiritually, to attain Shabbos. Well, then I'm not considering this. It says top of page test. Some of the Bnei Yisrael says Shabbos last the Shabbos. Yidden will observe the Shabbos to make the Shabbos. What does it mean to make the Shabbos? It means making Shabbos. Why do we use the term making Shabbos? We observe the Shabbos. We keep the halachas of Shabbos. Why do we call it making Shabbos? Because in the first level of Shabbos, we are making the Shabbos. We are creating the Shabbos with our work, with our preparation, with our both spiritual and physical things. We are making Shabbos, just like physically. In Yiddish, we use the expression "nach machen Shabbos," that we need to prepare for Shabbos. We need to set the table. We need to cook the food. We need to whatever. Spiritually as well, we make the Shabbos by doing whatever spiritual preparations need to be done beforehand. That's level one in Shabbos. Line 2 on page test. The second level of Shabbos, the Shabbos mekadshe. It's the idea that Shabbos is already holy by itself. Yom Tov is distinct from Shabbos. The Chazal say, we've mentioned this many times, that in, let's say, in Yom Tov davening, if Yom Tov and Shabbos comes out together, so then we say, Mekadesh HaShabbos B'Yisrael V'Azman. That's the lashon we say in davening and in Kiddush. Why this order? Why do we say Shabbos, then Yisrael, and then Hazmanim, meaning the times, meaning Moedim Yom Tovim? Either put Yidden at the beginning, Mekadesh Yisrael HaShabbos V'Azmanim, or put Yidden at the end if they're not as important. Mekadesh HaShabbos V'Azmanim V'Yisrael. Why is it inserted right in between? So the Chazal explain that Shabbos, the Kedusha of Shabbos exists independent of the Yidden. When the seventh day comes, automatically the sanctity of Shabbos comes about. The Kedusha of Shabbos comes out automatically on the seventh day. Yom Tov, that's dependent upon the Yidden. It depends on Bezdin being Mekadosh HaChodesh. Whenever they establish Rosh Chodesh Nisan is, so then 15 days from that will be Pesach. And then 49 days after that will be the 50th day after that will be Shavuos, etc., etc. So since Yom Tov is dependent upon the Yidden, so it says, first says Mekadosh HaShabbos. Hashem sanctifies the Shabbos. That's independent of the Yidden. Then he sanctifies the Yidden. And once the Yidden are there, then Azman, and then there could be the sanctity of Yom Tov. So the expression that the Chazal used to show that Shabbos is sanctified independently of Yidden is Mekadosh HaVakayim. In regards to what we are talking about, we are talking about a level of holiness that the holiness of Shabbos is in such a type of way where it is totally and completely contained, self-contained, and independent. Before we were talking about level 1, that's prepared for Shabbos. Level number 2 is that the holiness of Shabbos is built in. That's a higher level of holiness. It's not done through our avodah. Not coming from down here. It's coming from itself. That's level number 2. Madrega Shlish is the third level of Shabbos. It's the level of the gift that's to be found in Shabbos. I was saying the Chazal say Matonach. I was looking for this. I knew the Maimer mentioned this Maimer Chazal, what I mentioned before, that I have a matana in my treasure house, in my storehouse, the Shabbos Shema, and it's called Shabbos. So that is something that's coming from Hashem. That's the third level. The Chlolas, and in general, even though we could say the entire Shabbos has these 3 levels, but in Shabbos itself, it breaks down according to the different times. Chlolos in the Shalosh Madreges, Elohim, Shloisha Hazmanim, these 3 levels. They're the 3 times. The Leil Shabbos, Yom Shabbos, V'Rayv. Friday night is Misha Torah Be'erev Shabbos, Yaakov Shabbos. That's a result of our work. It's coming direct connection with the weekday. It's following the weekday immediately. Then the Shabbos day Shabbos day is the level of Mekadshe V'Kaima. Shabbos is its own holiness. And then there's a level that the will of all wills, the inner part of Kesef becomes revealed, the level of the afternoon of Shabbos. That is the Matana of Shabbos. Mitzad Goydel Malas of Shabbos, and it's because the great quality and advantage of Shabbos, who befrat Karvos Yumei, especially close to the conclusion of Shabbos, is Man Raiva Deraivan at the time of Raiva Deraivan Kimavur Behem Shchsav Tavri Savachvav, Goydel's Miles as Man Raiva Deraivan. Like it's explained in the Maimon of Savachvav, the great quality of this time of Raiva Deraivan. It is similar to the most highest level of Mashiach's times. Inshallah, Amr was saying was all concerning that time Mashiach, the Chazal said, that the world to come has no eating and no drinking, meaning it's so totally removed from this world. It's understood how incomparably higher it is in comparison to the weekdays. You remember we said before that during the weekdays we engage in physical things. Shabbos is holy, but we don't engage in the physical things. And even those physical things that we do engage in is a level of kedusha. The eating, the drinking, the pleasure that we have in Shabbos is all part of the mitzvah of Einim Shabbos. So it's of a totally different caliber than the eating and drinking during the week. And then there's a level of Shabbos that's similar to what it says in Mashiach's times, that Ein B'Le'ach Achila V'Shtia. That's why we have about the Shal Shudas time, we are Memayit, we just eat to be Yoitze and so on. In other words, Shabbos, especially afternoon, the end of Shabbos is completely removed from this world. Now you're telling me that this has to impact the world? Alpha became still in all, Shabbos, who the ultimate purpose and the goal of Shabbos is it's the empowerment for the inspiration down below in the service of the weekdays that follow Shabbos. That is why we say at the end of Shabbos, immediately following the great level of Raiva Deraivan that we had at the end of Shabbos, Al Tira Avdi Yankov, do not fear my servant Yaakov. Very interesting thing. We're talking about fear. He doesn't mention the word fear over here. I mean, he doesn't focus on the word fear. He's going to focus, we call him a servant, and we call him Yaakov. Shabbos on B'chinas Yisrael. On Shabbos, we're on a level of Yisrael, meaning that we're beyond dealing with the world. So I'm a master over everything. We do not need to have the work and toil to refine the world. And then on Shabbos, we're in a state of not servants, we're in a state of being children to Hashem. And afterwards, in Motzei Shabbos, lots of related lias b'chinas Yaakov Avdi, that we have to return and descend to be in the level of Yaakov, my servant, throughout the 6 days of the week. Now we have to descend into the world. So now we're the level of Yaakov. Yaakov is the level of Yud Akev. We're dealing, the Yud has to come down to the heel and to the lowest most level. And we're the level of a servant. Level of a servant indicates where Lakus comes down into the worlds of Bri Yitzir Asiyah. Therefore, this is the connection with Al Tira. That's why we tell them, don't be scared. Al Tira of the Yaakov. When we're in an aloof way, when we're in a totally transcendent way, completely removed from the world, so then there's nothing with the fear. But when we immerse ourselves into the world, when we engage with the world, that's scary. Therefore, we say, Al Tira of the Yaakov. Do not fear my servant Yaakov to descend into the world. With this, through the Shabbos and through this Al Tira, we are empowering that we should be able to engage with the world. Let's just finish the mimer with the last paragraph, which is not totally clear, the connection with the last paragraph. Parts of the last paragraph is not clear, he says in the notes, because we're missing some part. This we come to what it says in next week's parsha. And the Rebbe always likes to, in the later years especially, the Rebbe emphasized that now by Mincha we're going to read by Yikra Moshe. So therefore it's connected. It's not just next week. It's already on Shabbos. This Shabbos we're already reading by Yikra Moshe. By Yikra Lashon Chibur. First of all, the Chazal say that the fact that it says that Hashem called out to Moshe. Why is it the idea of calling out? Why is it the concept of calling? That's why Hashem on Moshe, speak to Moshe. Calling, the Rashi says, it's an idea that shows on Hashem's love. And this love is, again, the same closeness that we were speaking about that takes place on Shabbos, the revelation from above, the great love, and so on. And with the small aleph, like it says Vayikra, when it says they called Moshe, it says no small aleph at the end of Vayikra in the Sefer Torah. Like Moshe Kasu Divrei Yom, not like it says in Divrei Yomim, where it starts enumerating the generations. So it starts off with Adam. It says Adam ba'alef Rabbos. It says Adam with a large aleph. So it says Kedu Asipur, like it's known the story. That the Tzemach Tzedek asked by his Zayda, the Alter Rebbe, Maduan Namar Vayikra ba'alef Ze'eram, that it says that why does it say Vayikra but a small aleph? That's because of the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, over there, there's a whole story that says concerning that this is by the Tzemach Tzedek's upsharnish. By Tzemach upsharnish, there's a minhag amongst Yidden that the first part of Chumash, the entry to Cheder, the Achnasa l'Cheder that's done when a child is 3 years old, is that they study with him Chumash Vayikra. Let the pure ones, in other words, the children, come and be involved in the pure ones, in other words, the karbonos. So we started with Chumash Vayikra. So he started reading Vayikra and he saw the small aleph. He asked, why is it written with a small aleph? Says the Alter Rebbe, he got into a state of meditation and so on. And then he said, and he compared, and it contrasted by Adam Arishon, was a very great and high person, and he appreciated godliness very much so. And he was Yitzir Kapash HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he was formed by Hashem's hand, but that itself caused him to feel a certain amount of self and focused on self and so on. So the aleph indicates his like pride, the large aleph that's written over there by the Adam of Divrei Yomim, and the small aleph on the other hand that it says by Moshe Rabbeinu, even though Moshe Rabbeinu was Chachmei Law and Chachmei Law shines Zahir and stuff, still in all, none of what he had and none of the revelations that came to him were not something that caused by him to hold himself high and to be prideful and so on. He had the small aleph indicating the minimizing of himself. And again, it doesn't say really the connection so much how this connects to the rest of the mimer. We're missing that part of this mimer. Any questions?
What's the difference between Matana and Mikacha?